All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining today. So as a reminder, this today is the first part of a series of webinars focused on cloud migration best practices for Azure. But before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. Everybody's going to receive a follow-up email from us with a link to the recording, an overview of AVASOFT's capabilities, and a PDF one-pager with some information on our offerings that directly relate to today's content. Also, in order to keep today as collaborative as possible, if you have any questions, please make sure to use the chat or Q&A to ask those questions, and we'll make sure to get them answered as quickly as possible. Some we may answer into the chat if it's a quick answer. Others will read out to the presenters if it happens to be something that requires a bit more information or a slightly more complex answer. And as a final item, if you find today's content helpful, make sure to check out the other parts to this series, as well as any of the other great content that we have going on this year. So with that, our presenters today are Suhaila and Parthaban. So I'm going to hand it off to them to get started. Thanks again. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Chuck, for giving that intro. We are so excited to meet you all, everyone. It is a good day, and thank you so much for joining today. And like Chuck said, we are going to do a series of webinar on different topics, starting from migration and different areas of cloud. And this is going to be the first ground setting, migration. The webinar that's going to be the starting point of other webinar. So that being said, I'm Parthiban Sambit, who is a cloud practice leader in AVASOFT, heading the Microsoft practice and working on the different initiatives on Microsoft front, and work with multiple, customers of different line of businesses, and from migration to implementation to modernization and all the different areas of migrations. And I have Suela here. Suela, can you give a quick intro of yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Parthiban and Chuck. So, hi everyone. I'm Sohaila Farveen, a cloud architect at AVASOFT. So, I have been working here for over 5 years, and I had an opportunity to collaborate with clients across industries like healthcare, logistics, and education institutions to helping them to build a secure and scalable cloud environments. So, as part of AVASOFT, I'm working in the Microsoft partnership, and I specialize in Azure and have worked on multiple advanced specialization. So, looking forward to sharing the insights with you all in today's webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Suela. So, before getting into the technical part of it, we just want to give a quick intro about who we are. AVASOFT is a globally recognized Microsoft managed solution partner who specialized in AI-based digital transformation. We are 1,500 plus teams, technologies all over the different regions, starting from US, Canada. We have different locations in US and Canada, and our development center is from India. And we thrive, and we are fully organized into Microsoft solution areas, and we make sure that we get all the different specializations from Microsoft to prove that we are the best in this businesses. So that being said, we'll go to the agenda part. So today's discussion is going to be around why organizations are really migrating to Azure. What are the different challenges we are facing from the customer end on migrating to cloud, especially to Azure? And if you have to migrate to Azure with a confidence, what are the different areas that we should be focused on, and what are the pitfalls that we should be aware of so that the migration is smooth? And little bit a quick intro about what is Azure Migrate and Modernize program, and Microsoft's cloud adoption framework, followed by a Q&A session on these topics. So that being said, Azure migration imperative. So Azure by itself, the Microsoft front has a lot of different advantages to move to cloud itself, and that's already well known. But I just want to highlight few advantages of moving to cloud, for which the first one would be cost saving benefits. Compared to having our own data center, going to cloud basically gives a 33% more cost saving benefits when we reserve the long term capacity for our instances. Along with that, cloud has different landscape of pricings for different workloads like production, dev, and testing, which can also reduce the cost to up to 55%. And being to cloud, that means that the security updates are going to be extended, and it's going to be fully supported by Microsoft. And the extended security updates are easily up to 5 years and more. With respect to Azure hybrid benefit, Microsoft since its whole ecosystem itself supporting all these things, you can easily port all your licenses from on-premises and move to Azure with seamless integration. And Microsoft is the one of the biggest cloud adopted and cloud solution provider, which being adopted by all the most of the Fortune 500 companies, and offers a lot of different framework for easy and flexible migration. Since a lot of big players are already moved to cloud, the approach is already proven and it's solid. And Microsoft, by nature, they are more into the sustainable and green energy of managing this infrastructure, and they're fully invested in go green and going carbon efficient by 2025, and which also reduces the environment impact and overall emissions that we contribute to this society. So we were talking about sustainability and how Microsoft is committed to make environment more greener. And moving forward, so we'll just highlight on why are usually organizations migrating to Azure. So before going into this, I just want to share a quick story about one of the client who's one of the biggest university, very famous education institution, very well known, and they reached us to migrate to Azure. And their reason was very interesting, and I see that is pretty much common also. So they had a in-house data center which they have VMware licensing to be having a very limited timeline. It's going to expire in 6 months, and they wanted to check whether they wanted to move to cloud or should they even extend the licenses. What would be the beneficial part and these things. And I think most of the customers who has an in-house data center end up in this kind of place where their licensing is going to be coming soon for renewal, and they are really not sure on whether moving to cloud is the right choice or not, or should we take more time to assess what it is. So to solve this kind of problem, we have Microsoft funded cloud migration assessment, which is we call rapid cloud migration assessment, where we come in and see what is the overall IT landscape of the customer is. For this customer, we had to jump in and then we have to look into what are the different systems they have in place, and what are the servers, what is their licensing structure looks like, what is the user base looks like. So when we exploring all these things, it was so interesting to see that they had built their own source code repository by themselves. I was so shocked that they just used an SVN version of the open source, and then they built their own source code version where people, where GitHub or Azure DevOps has evolved so far. That is one of the very interesting story. I never saw a customer who built their own source code repository, and that too for the volume of the code that they are building in, which was really a good opening statement for their management also to think about how equipped or how fast they're moving along the technology landscape. So that being said, some of the major reasons why customers will be willing to move to Azure would be reducing cost first, because managing an in-house data center, we all know how hectic it would be. Maintaining your own data centers, power supply, cooling, in-house IT team, and all those things. And there is a potential failure point is also very high. So moving to cloud will easily reduce this by 50%, because all of that comes under the shared responsibility model, where cloud provider takes care of most of the things that is a big problematic situation for customers, and we can focus on the actual business area. An existing data center, this is the exact scenario which I was talking about, where you have an existing data center, we have to come out of it, there is some licensing complexities, or there's an acquisition or something. There are different situations that comes under the exiting data center scenario. Improving security and compliance in this arena of having our own data center, and improving the security complex is two main things that we have to primarily focus on. And if we focus on that, both is itself a separate world, and it needs a lot of energy to maintain. And that is where Microsoft comes with their Sentinel solutions and different Microsoft security solutions that comes handy, and that is easily attachable to the existing solutions and go run on the flow. Scalability and performance, there is no more good reason to go to cloud when it compared to scalability. We all know the physical limitations of having the own data center, and extending it, scaling it would be a cumbersome process. And BCDR, since we have a lot of availability zones and different regions that is available in Microsoft Azure across the globe, across the US, it would be easy to set up a BCDR compared to having an on-premise data center or even a co-hosting provider, because even having a co-hosting provider would need complicated networking setup between the co-host and the cloud or the on-premises that we are operating to. So these are the different reasons, turning points where customers move to Azure. So that being said, I'll hand it over to Suela to talk about some of the common challenges we are facing in cloud migration.
Thanks, Pratibin. So, so everyone, we can go ahead and talk about the common challenges so that we are facing in cloud migration. So, even with a strong business case for migration, right? So many organizations run into common pitfall, like as Parthiban mentioned. So, based on our experience, so I do have three key challenges listed down. So, one is like lack of strategy and planning. So many companies, like they are just jumping into the migration like without clearly defining their business goals, like what they want, like, and why they want to migrate to cloud and everything, and without assessing their application. So they should not move into cloud because they don't know like how many servers they need to provision in cloud, and so those everything. So accessing which application should move and how so that things business should know before migrating to cloud, especially in Azure. And the readiness gaps, so like organization often underestimate the technical skills and the infrastructure that they needed, so that leading potentially to delays and issues in the cloud migration. And the post migration optimization, so few businesses complete the migration successfully, but they will fail to set up a proper monitoring, governance, and all the cost control mechanisms to make their cloud operation efficient. So in order to make that to running efficiently, right, so we need to follow a proper guidance after moving to the cloud. So at Avasoft, so we help organizations avoid these mistakes that we mentioned in the slide. So by following a structured approach based on Microsoft's cloud adoption framework. So this ensures that every stage, from planning and migration to optimization is well executed and reducing the risk and maximizing the business value. So here we do have a list of migration best practices listed down. We can go ahead with that. And in migration to Azure with confidence. So here we do have a list of best practices that organization should follow before migration, during, and the post migration as well. So the first one is like finding a right partner. So migration like is not something for organization to handle a everyday task. So even with they have their in-house skilled IT team. So it comes with complexities, risk, and a lot of moving parts when it comes to migration. So that's where a trusted partner like Avasoft makes all the difference. Like we bring expertise, like all the best practices that we need to follow in order to migrate to cloud, and all the Microsoft backed support to make your migration seamless and stress free. So at Avasoft, we have guided many clients through seamless Azure migrations, helping them modernize their workload with the support of my Microsoft Azure Migrate and Modernize program, as well as the cloud adoption framework. So with the structured approach of CAF, right? So we ensure that every migration is aligned with your specific business IT goals and setting up you for the long-term success in cloud. So I just want to give an gist about like what does Azure Migrate and Modernize program offer. So it has a lot of funding opportunities for pre-migration, during migration, as well as the post-migration activities directly from Microsoft. So at Avasoft, we have all the advanced specialization required to fully leverage that AMP program. So we are helping customer to unlock Microsoft funding at every stage of the migration. So by combining our deep expertise with AMP benefit, so we make cloud adoption not only efficient but also the cost effective. So ensuring like you get the most out of your Azure investment. So the finding best partner, the right partner is one of the critical things. So before moving to the cloud, and the next one is like defining the business goal. So as I already mentioned during the common challenges, right? So organization should know like what is their goals for migrating to cloud. So as Parthiban already mentioned, like the reason why customers are moving to cloud is reducing the cost and all the reducing the cost with the capex, and they want to only move with the opex and all the technical efficiencies and all those things, right? So the business should know their goals before moving to cloud. Like they have to ask themselves like are we looking to cut down the cost, do we need a better scalability to peak the loads, and is the security is the main concern. So having a clear reason for migration help set measurable success criteria. So think of ROI, return of investment, improvements, and all the operational efficiency. This ensures that the migration is not just about moving the workload, but also delivering the real business value.
Yeah, and just to look at this, it's directly connecting to finding the right partner again, because most of the cases, when we talk to customers, customers are really there is a lot of gap in which the customers have to understand what are the potential benefits that we can get from cloud, for which understanding that would be a complex arena again to spend a lot of time there. But a right partner would be easily able to give what are the different programs, what would be the easy way to go in, and even define business goal for the customers also. So that is very crucial, and that's connecting back to that.
So the next another one is like the cloud adoption framework. So that is the another part. Migrating can get chaotic like without a solid strategy. So that's why we follow Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework, a structure and a step-by-step approach to ensure the smooth transition. So here, Cloud Adoption Framework has 6 different stages. So each and every stages, customer needs to look into it and need to take the required action before they are migrating to cloud. The first one is like the defining the strategy. It's kind of like what all their, again, it's a business and the technical goals what they want to, when they are migrating to cloud. And planning, so identify like what needs to move and when. Because as Parthiban mentioned, like like we had a client in an education institution. So in there, like they do have a multiple application that are hosted in their in-house infrastructure. So in that, right, so we have to plan like which one needs to be migrated at first, so that we can reduce the complexity of the migration and we can give a zero downtime during the migration as well. So that is why the plan is crucial, so when doing that migration. And ready, so in the ready stage, like it's basically we'll be setting up the Azure cloud environment, so creating a secure and scalable Azure landing zone for the smooth migration. So we'll be deeping diver into the Azure landing zone in our next webinar sessions, so stay tuned for that. And the next stage is like the adopt. So like I just wanted to take a deep into that adopt stage, because it contains the migration and modernization. So it will cover all the best practices that needs to be followed during the migration. So once the cloud environment is ready, it's right, the landing zone is ready, so we need to take the adoption steps. So the migration process should be well structured to minimize the disruption to business operation. So here we have listed down a list of migration tools that Microsoft Azure offering, so which contains Azure Migrate and the database migration services, all the site recovery and everything. So we will make sure to use every services which Azure offering to make sure the smooth transition to the cloud. So in that, like Azure Migrate is a key tool for accessing, migrating, and all optimizing the workload. So how Azure Migrate support a seamless migration? So like first one is discovery and assessment. So we have to identify the dependencies and the readiness and the estimated cost. So obviously we client needs to know like what cost they are cutting down when they are moving to the cloud, and what they are going to pay for the use in the cloud. And the server and database migration, so like all the lift and shift, rehosting, re-platform strategies. So Azure Migrate is supporting on that as well. And along with that, right, so we are providing a Microsoft funded assessment with AVASOFT. So as part of Azure Migrate and Modernize program, so AVASOFT offers a Microsoft funded assessment to help organization to evaluate their cloud readiness. So it includes like workload discovery. So they are will be identifying the dependencies and assessing the migration, and the cost estimation. So already I mentioned about that, the cost, how much they are going to cutting down with the help of the total cost of ownership, and how much they are going to spend in cloud. And the strategic recommendations, so we'll be providing a roadmap to organization for a structured and risk free migration. So all this will be comes under the Microsoft funded assessment. With Avasoft we'll be providing that. And the next one is like the pilot migration. So the many organization, so they are hesitating to migrate due to concerns about like performance, cost, and the potential downtime. So we have to conduct a pilot migration, like migrating a small non-critical workload to cloud. So to help address these concerns to organization to take their decisions before they are migrating to Azure cloud. So it allows like businesses to test, Azure capabilities, all their performance, and the potential challenges. What are all the challenges that they are going to face before the full scale migration. So the best practice is like the pilot migration is a proven way to validate the Azure performance, security, cost effectiveness before committing to a full migration. So with Avasoft Microsoft funded assessment through the AMP program, so organization take an informed decision and migrate with confidence. So after migrating, so the post migration will comes into the picture. So after migrating everything from in-house infrastructure to the Azure cloud, so the modernization enhances the efficiency, security, and scalability. So which includes like adopting a cloud native services like the Kubernetes, Azure Functions, or all the PaaS services for the microservices based architecture, and leveraging AI and analytics. So with the help of machine learning, Power BI for the better decision making, and automation workflows like using logic apps, DevOps practices to improve the operational efficiency. So, for example, I have an example for a Netflix. So they moved some of their workload to Azure. So it based on the Microsoft learning based content recommendation. So it comes under the modernization. They are modernized their whole workload. So this resulted in a higher engagement and increased watch time. So by migrating efficiently and modernizing smartly, so the organization can unlock new revenue system and stay competitive in today's digital landscape. And the next stage in cloud adoption framework is govern and manage. So like we have to keep optimizing the post migration. We have to identify like what are all the new technologies that is coming in and everything. So at Avasoft, so we'll be on an up to date technology. So we help customer to adopt the new technologies to improve the efficiency and like to be in a to stay in this competitive digital world. And the next one is like the Microsoft funded assessment. So in that, like we are providing, as I already mentioned, like at Avasoft we providing the Microsoft funded assessment. So we are discovering and providing the roadmap before the transition to cloud. And next one is picking the right migration strategy. So in that, like there will be 5 R's. uh, so in that, like we'll be having a rehost, refactor, re-architect, rebuild, and replace. So rehost is like the fastest way to move to cloud, like with minimal challenges. Like we are lifting something and then shifting something to Azure cloud. And refactor is consist of using all platform as a service, which I mentioned earlier, like Azure Functions, Azure App Service, and those things to optimize to cloud. And the re-architect, so we'll be helping organization to redesign their existing legacy applications to leverage the cloud native advantages like auto scaling and all the new capabilities. And rebuild, so we'll be helping the customer to build a new application for the optimized cloud. And replace, like will be providing a suggestions to client to get rid of their legacy system, and providing the SaaS solution to that is offering by Microsoft Azure. And like instead of managing their infrastructure by themselves, so it'll help companies to adopt the SaaS solution. So it will be free for them to, like they don't need to manage the infrastructure anymore.
Yeah. And with respect to the strategy, right? The strategy is not just go with just one strategy. This is always, it's going to be a permutation and combination of all these fives. For the customer that we discussed about the educational customer, we basically gave a rehost and a refactor first, and as an phased approach. So one of the important best practices that we learned and we have seen which helped a lot of customer is a phased approach. What is phased approach? Phased approach is basically going, breaking down the overall migration journey into different phases and breaking down that into the logical milestones that helps us solve the immediate problem at the same time, help us achieve the overall vision of the migration journey. So in this case, we have advise the customer to exit out of the VMware data center because of the pricing difference and the terms in which they have to extend their licenses, because if they're going to extend for an year, the cost is little gets in the pricey end. And if they're going to go for 3 years, and again, it's going to give a stop to their cloud, innovation journey. It's going to be a barrier in the innovation journey. So what we have to basically suggest to customer is just go with a rehost. Within the 3 months, we have given them an clear estimate on how we are going to rehost. So we have migrated all the workloads directly lift and shift from their on-premises to cloud. That's the first stop. That's the first win to cut down the existing data center and also reduce the overhead license cost. That help customer to do the first step of the phased migration. And after which we have to identify the list of, they had a bunch of applications starting from the one I mentioned, which had a custom developed source code repository for which we have to suggest replace. So each and every, we have to go into a detailed inventory and assessment for each application and give them a strategy on one of these 5 Rs. So the approach for the custom source code repository is cutting down, replace it with GitHub or Azure DevOps. In their case, we went with Azure DevOps because their use case is, having Azure boards in place, having, Scrum and Agile project management boards in place. So we have to help them move to Azure boards and Azure DevOps for their DevOps pipeline. So we replaced that with the SaaS version of DevOps solution, and their application we have to re-architect from scratch to go with Azure serverless platform, which comprises of Azure EKS, Azure AKS, and Azure ACS, and also Azure Container Apps. So we'll have a separate webinars to talk about the in-depth details of how this migration is already happening, what is Azure Kubernetes service, how it can help us to decentralize the application structure and all those things. But I just want to throw some light on how the strategy and a phased migration approach will actually work.
Thanks, Patwan, for sharing that. And so the next one is like the pilot migration. So as mentioned already in the CAF adopt phase, right? So jumping into a full migration, so without testing is risky. So we have to do a pilot migration with a non-critical workload first to migrate that to Azure to test the performance. So and based on that, like we can identify the potential issues and what are the optimization that we need to do and the cost saving opportunities based on the Azure Cost Explorer. So a pilot migration I like act as a lower risk dress rehearsal before scaling up. No, so those things, and after that like the cost control. So cloud cost overruns are one of the biggest post migration headache. So here is how to avoid them. So using the Azure pricing calculator to estimate the cost before migration and implement the Azure cost management to track spending the cost in real time, so we can have a budget alert configured to make informed decision with the client like we are scaling this to this and it will cost like around this much. So and the take advantage of reserved instances for long term cost savings. So by planning this cost like before migration, you can ensure the cloud expenses stay predictable and manageable. And the next one is the security and compliance. So security is not just about setting up the firewall and everything. So it's about like continuous monitoring and proactive defense. So, like, follow this Azure security benchmark and zero trust principle, like to minimize risk is one of the best practice. And we can also make use of the Microsoft Defender for cloud for the real-time threat detection. And at Avasoft, like, we'll always ensure, like, we are ensuring the compliance like HIPAA, GDPR, and other industry standards which organization wants before migrating. And also a secure migration, it's not just about moving the data, so it's like protecting it every step of the way in the each and every phase which Pathaman mentioned during the migration. And the governance and access is also the another best practice. So like without proper governance, the cloud environment can run into a costly and unmanageable mess. So setting up Azure policy to enforce the security and compliance rules. So we can make use of the Azure role-based access control to define like who gets access to what, and establishing a RACI matrix so everyone knows like their cloud responsibilities, and based on that like they can manage their cloud, and automating everything you can with DevOps, So managing the cloud environment manually, it's the legacy way. Like the modern way is automating everything. So we can make use of the infrastructure as a code with Terraform or Azure native Azure blueprints or biceps to deploy the infrastructure effortlessly. And setting up Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions to automate the deployment to reduce the human errors. So the last one is like optimizing, keep optimizing and innovating. So migration is just a beginning, like moving to Azure is not the finish line. So it's just a starting point to maximize the value. So business should use the Azure Monitor for the real time monitoring and the regular review for the cost spent and the scaling strategies and all, and leveraging the Azure AI services and machine learning to drive the innovation. So yeah, I think these are all the best practices that we have for today.
Yeah,
I think
and
it's
also
useful.
with respect to that automation and optimization, that's a tricky, slippery slope where most of the IT teams or the customers who are involved in this journey directly might get confused on what exact innovation should we focus on, or is it really needed for us, or this is the new way of doing things and we have to do it. So that is a slippery slope that you know uh, people with solid foundations has to come in place and advise on what is really needed and how is it actually going to help with the business movement. So that is something that I want to touch upon, and we are good with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So uh, I have a couple of questions that were sent in. So some of them you already covered with some of the content, which is why I waited until the end. But the first one is, how do I extend Azure to hybrid, multi-cloud, or edge environments if I don't only want to commit to Azure?
So Azure Hybrid and multi-cloud and edges and a different landscape where Microsoft provides us with a lot of different tools from different platforms. I would say from Azure Arc, Azure Stack, Azure Stack Edge, and a lot of family of different services. So for the first part of the question on extending my on-premises, but that has to be managed by Azure, or that has to be managed with the modern cloud infrastructure. Azure Arc comes into the place. Azure Arc helps us, manage the on-premises also. So if we don't have, or if we already have a solid on-premise landscape and we have the license and everything set up already, but we just need an innovative way of managing them from the extensive ability of the latest cloud solutions. Azure Arc is the go-to place. We can extend the cloud, Azure cloud management surface on top of the on-premise area, and we can manage it through the cloud. So that helps customers to manage that easily. That
Okay.
would be the first part for it. And
Okay.
and and with respect to Azure Stack, there are customers who would be also having different cloud or co-hosting environment, and even a different cloud service provided by itself for a specific solution. And Azure Stack and Arc combined together will help us manage those areas also together in a single portal view from the cost perspective and also from the management perspective. And that helps a lot of IT guys like us with a, different management area.
And just one point to make on your response, and just so everybody knows, Microsoft rebranded Azure Stack Azure Local, but most people don't know the Azure Local term yet. So we're still using Azure Stack. So I just wanted to throw that out, that we're using it on purpose as opposed to switching to the Azure Local so far. So another question is, with all the customers that you've worked with, are there any territories or geographies that are not supported for discovery and assessment using something like Azure Migrate?
So Microsoft Azure Migrate is supported in I would say most of the regions worldwide. Starting from North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, all these different areas, and all the important regions and availability zones of these areas are also covered by Azure Migrate. But if there is any specific location that we are focusing on, that is something that we can look upon. But most of the regions that is available worldwide is covered by Azure Migrate.
All right. And the last question that was asked that I don't think that you touched on is, when doing discovery, what's the difference between using something like Azure Migrate Discovery and then using the original map toolkit?
That's a very, very, very good question, because Azure Map or the Microsoft Map Toolkit is just like a basic utility that you install, and it will give a list of and detailed inventory, which would not be currently in sync. So the difference between Azure Map to Microsoft Map Toolkit and Azure Assess and Migrate is that we'll get a continuous feed of data from the on-premises or from the target environment, and it will be in sync with the the size. It will be easy for us to right size the workloads. Whereas this one, the map toolkits data would be a little static, but Azure Migrate, the assessed inventory would be live. So any usage in the systems would be lively reported to Azure Migrate. So that helps us to go with the right sized version for cloud. That would be the biggest advantage here.
Yeah, in adding to that, like with the help of Azure Migrate, like we can lively migrate the things to cloud, and it will help us to design a landing zone also based on the sizes of the application that is hosted in the in-house infrastructure.
All right. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions, at least not ones that were touched on through your material. So I did want to give a final thank you to everybody who attended and registered. I do want to give a reminder not to forget to check out all of the great content that we have coming up across both cloud and the entire Microsoft ecosystem throughout this year. And as a final note, we'd be happy to schedule some time with any of you who are interested in deep diving or discussing any projects. Look forward to our email that comes out after the webinar with your recording and our overview. And thank you again to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you
Thanks,
so much for
everyone.
joining us today.